Thank you for being here today at the Math Institute of 2023. It is our first large event of the school year. I'm Patsy Egan, and I direct Atlas. We're housed at Hamline University in St. Paul, and we're so glad to be hosting this event this year. We're happy to again host this event virtually, and so many of you are here from across the state, and it's not possible without a lot of support. And so Gail and Marisa, if you have a moment, go ahead and turn your cameras on and give us a wave. These are two of the many faces behind the scenes, our events manager and our operations manager. Thank you so much for all that you do behind the scenes. This work cannot be done without a full team, and Gail and Marisa are a critical part of that magic. So today we're talking about math, and our keynote speaker will be introduced shortly. And she joins us from an important initiative called Citizen Math, and she'll share more about what they do. And on their website, Citizen Math states, when learning connects your students to the world, they develop critical thinking skills that enhance their success in life and in class. And in their mission statement, they proclaim Citizen Math exists to make the world a better place by inspiring people to develop the problem-solving skills they need to analyze, discuss, and solve important issues faced by society. And so it is in that spirit, one of critical thinking, of doing better by facing important issues in our society. And because even though this is a virtual event, most of us are standing or sitting on land in Minnesota, that I share the land acknowledgement from Minnesota, from Hamline University, where Atlas is housed. If you're near a window, I encourage you to take a moment and look outside. It's probably raining, it is in St. Paul. And notice what's happening to the trees in the sky on this fall day, as I read this from our campus equity office. Hamline acknowledges that the land on which we gather and refer to as Minnesota is the traditional and unceded territory of the Dakota and Ojibwe. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, the land where the waters reflect the skies. We pay respect to the members of not only those tribes, but others as well, both past and present, and their continuing relationship to their ancestral lands. Making this recognition expresses gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and honors the Indigenous people who have been existing with and on the land from time immemorial. Those long-standing history is significant as land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism, appropriation, and genocide have relevant real-time realities. We need to build mindfulness regarding the source of our present land privilege, understanding the long-standing history from which it comes, and seek to reconcile our place within both. Hamline, as an institution and community, will hold itself accountable as an Indigenous partner by working stridently to amplify, address, and counter the historical and contemporary injustices that continue to impact Indigenous people individually, systemically, and structurally. And I'd just like to add that our keynote speaker, Heather Buskirk, joins us from near Schenectady, New York. Schenectady is a Dutch version of a Mohawk word, Schenectady, meaning the place beyond the pines. And you can read more about the local Indigenous history and peoples of the land acknowledgement at Union College, and I've linked that to the slide available in your participant folder. So thank you for listening to that statement, and thank you for being here and for making adult education a better place for your learners and your colleagues. We owe a lot of thank yous today, and one big thank you goes to the Atlas Numeracy and Special Projects Coordinator, Lindsay Poost, who is responsible for creating the vision today and for making it a reality. I'll turn things over to Lindsay.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. I know you can't really see it, but I am wearing my math button that says I'm a mathematician. Anybody else have math gear? Anyone? Put it in the chat if you do, because we can appreciate it virtually. I owe a lot of thanks to the team. I could not do this without a team of amazing people. So we have our M&I advisory team here. And if you want to just come in on camera and just wave, we have Andy and Katie and Amber, Donna, Jenna, Casey, Justine, Megan, Tom, Cindy, Rebecca, and Mark. So thank you so much for your leadership and for helping make today possible. We also want to especially thank Andy and Katie and Megan and Marcy, who are presenting this afternoon. The concurrent sessions that you will have a chance to choose between between two. They are going to be leading us in some workshops later on. So thank you for that. A couple of announcements before we get started and hand things over to our keynote speaker. We have some math content webinars coming up. You don't have to memorize these dates, but just know there are 3, December 5th, February 6th, and then one later in the spring. Please make sure you're signed up to receive notifications on the PD Connect newsletter. You will get alerts as for when you can register and the exact topics, etc. Also an MCTM save the date. It'll be April 11th through the 13th, a little bit earlier this year, but it will be up in Duluth again. And then another opportunity that I want to make you aware of for you or someone you know, we have a new cohort experience, short 8-week cohort experience. Some people on the call here are on today's Zoom, they went through the pilot, and so you can ask about it if you would like to, but really this was designed to provide an experience where math teachers can come together and really talk about how do I apply the math shifts and practices? What are some resources that we can use? How do we establish the relevancy of math thinking in the real world? Let's address some different mindsets about math and how the mindsets that we hold about math actually impact our teaching and our students. And so those are the overall objectives. And then on this flyer, there is and we will chat out this flyer. There is a breakdown of what questions we're grappling with each week. There are some synchronous webinars and some asynchronous work. So it's about 2 hours a week. And our next cohort is kicking off January 17th. So there's some time to think about it. There is a QR code here that you can scan and just put your name and email there. It is not a commitment. It is just letting me know that you want me to email you when the application goes live. Like you would get a direct update. We'll also have it in the newsletter, but if you want to make sure you hear about it when we do open up the applications, please use that QR code. And I will turn it over to Patsy to talk about a few other things happening.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple things we want to be sure are on your radars. Next week, we'll be in Bemidji for our fall regional event. So if you live closer to Bemidji, please join us for that event. It's live in person at the Sanford Center Thursday evening and all day Friday. A week later, we'll be in Mankato. So please join us for those events. I've just chatted out the events calendar where you can get registered and find out what it is that was being presented. There's several relicensure oriented events that you can join us for. Lots of good stuff happening. And then we'll be in the spring, March 1st, we'll be in the metro area. So look for more information on that. Please take the professional development survey if you haven't yet. It closes 1 week from today. So lots of information we gather from that survey, we directly use to make decisions about professional development offerings. So please, please, please take the survey if you haven't yet. Send it out to your colleagues. Also for your radars is a November 1st webinar related to CCRS, the College and Career Readiness Standards. That afternoon on November 1st, we'll be offering a webinar related to the new CASAS test. If you didn't know, CASAS has a new test that's been federally approved and will soon be coming to Minnesota. The Life and Work series is going away next summer and a new test is on its way. It's called the CASAS Steps, and we will be talking about it and how it relates to CCRS and the English Language Proficiency Standards. And Christine Wojtowski will be joining us for that. And if you have not yet joined the Numeracy Mighty Networks group, that's a way to stay connected. You'll want to do that. And so I'll put the link in to do that so that you can stay connected between all of these events with your math friends here in Minnesota.
Awesome. And then one last announcement. We want to be sure everyone knows about the National Numeracy Network, Adult Numeracy Network. And so what is ANN? It is a professional organization for math educators who work in adult education. And again, it is a national community of teachers that love to learn together. We will put the link to the website in the chat. You can also find ANN community on Twitter. What does it offer? Teaching resources, practitioner research, and there are grants for teachers. So if you are interested in participating, please check that out. And then if you do pay $20 a year or $40 for, I think, 3 years, so you do the math, it's a great deal. You do have access to workshops, committee meetings, the Teaching and Learning Institute at COABE, and an amazing resource, the Math Practitioner newsletter that goes out a few times a year as well. So there is definitely benefit to offering that $20. We have a flyer that you will be using today. Patsy, do you want to mention something about this?
Absolutely. Well, the thing about the flyer is that it's magic. So the magical flyer gets you to all the things. So you'll just want to be sure, Marisa just chatted it out. We'll chat it out a few more times throughout the morning as you need it. It contains a link to the participant folder, which is where all the important materials are housed for all of the workshops. It also has all of the links to all of the things. You really just need to keep track of one link, and that's the link to the flyer, and that gets you into everything and all of the materials. It also will house the recordings. So if you can keep track of this one link, you'll get everything that you'll need. Even if you have to step away at any point today, it will get you right back in to all the things. The materials, of course, are not all available yet, as Marisa points out. Everything will be posted soon. And the recordings, of course, once they are processed, will take the place of the Zoom links to join. So if you can keep track of this, bookmark it, you'll have everything you need. Also, the CEUs, this is where you'll fill out your evaluation. It'll be linked at the bottom of your flyer. That's where you'll fill out your evaluation. And once you fill out your evaluation, you'll be able to download your CEUs. So the flyer is important for all the reasons.
Thank you. So we are going to have a keynote this morning. We will take a break. Then there will be a workshop where we're going to actually get to be students. And so I'm really excited about that. Before lunch, we are going to be able to break into breakout groups, kind of debrief the morning by context, by teaching context. How does this apply? How can I take different things that I'm thinking about and kind of morph it, modify it, and apply it to my personal context. And then in the afternoon, after lunch, we will have those concurrent sessions to choose from. So how did we get here today? I am super jazzed that Heather Buskirk is here today. So I don't know about you, but have you seen questions like this? And we call them real life problems, myself included, right? Like, how many meatballs fit in a pot? Will the ball go through the hoop? So for a long time, I've been actually grappling with what does real world math mean? And application is part of the standards, right? We have the conceptual understanding, the procedural skill and fluency, and application, part of the shift of rigor. Like, but what does that actually mean beyond word problems? And about a year and a half ago, I read a book called Dear Citizen Math by Kareem Anni. And he was able to put to words a dissonance that I had been really feeling between I know math and numeracy is super important and a powerful tool for the world. I don't know how to communicate that beyond word problems like this. I was having issues. So we can see here from this quote, he says, like, these are questions. These are the activities that math educators, we have historically prioritized, and they all converge on a single answer. In fact, we're so accustomed to this that when we describe a math task as being open-ended, we usually mean that there's multiple ways to get to a single answer. And then throughout the book, he has this phrase. He says, let's look with math, not at math. Math is beautiful in and of itself. Not everybody sees that and appreciates it, but like there's a usefulness to math, right? Like, let's look with math as well and teach students to do that. And that really, really changed how I thought about real world math. He poses questions, many questions throughout the book. And that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that kind of helped me put some engaging applications of when I would need math to actually support an opinion that I have. Down to the, are humans innovating faster than we can keep up with? Should towns and cities recruit high-paying employers? Like, what impact does that have on a city? And engaging in those. He says when math educators create opportunities for students to analyze and discuss relevant issues in society, we help them understand the need to consider issues from multiple perspectives. There's a decent chance that students from conservative backgrounds and those from liberal backgrounds will disagree, but consensus isn't the goal. The goal is for students to think logically about the issue, to consider one another's reasoning, and to ground their disagreements in math. And that was so powerful. Math can be used as evidence, right? And so I brought this, like, there's so much more I could say, but I'm trying to condense it. And I brought this to the A team, and we were all like super jazzed about working out some of these problems and thinking about it. And then I reached out to Kareem, the author of this book, to see if he would be willing to speak. And he highly recommended his colleague and coworker, Heather Buskirk, who is here with us today. So I am hoping that today you will find your math worldview expand in ways that you didn't know possible, or maybe you had the feeling must be possible, but you didn't quite know how to put words to it. So our main objective, how can math be more meaningful, relevant, fun, and why should it be? How do we help students think critically and create a more fulfilling math experience? We want to explore possible answers to those questions and, of course, network with colleagues. So without further ado, I want to introduce Heather Buskirk. She is the Director of Professional Learning for Citizen Math and a national board certified teacher with over 12 years of classroom experience. In her work at Citizen Math, she develops and implements professional learning opportunities for math teachers looking to bring real-world conversations into their math classrooms. Additionally, she serves on the Professional Standards and Practices Board for the New York State Department of Education and as a trustee for the Knowles Teacher Initiative. She earned her BA in astronomy-physics and her MA in teaching from the University of Virginia. Heather.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Lindsay, for your very kind and thorough intro. I cannot express how thrilled I am to see so many educators gathered today to talk about math and to also talk about how we can and should make math class better. I'm honored to speak with a group of teachers who believe everyone deserves a great education and who have truly embraced that ideal by choosing to work with adults that did not find success in the K through 12 system. Before coming to my current company, Citizen Math, I taught both math and physics in a variety of settings in upstate New York, including both traditional and alternative high schools. I particularly cherished those hard-fought victories shared with my students who had been written off by both the system and themselves. But I also remember just how impossible that work can feel at times. So I hope by sharing a bit of my own story today, we can explore a bit of what's broken in math class. And instead, we can shape learning experiences that help students build positive and empowering relationships with math. So in this talk, I'd like to tell you about my relationship with math and math class and how that came to shape my approach to teaching. And then we'll look at what this means for you in your teaching context. I recognize that everyone in this audience may not identify as a math teacher, but I suspect you are all teachers of math in some way. And much of what I'm sharing could apply to other subjects as well. Also, I know that not everyone teaches in a context that they would describe as a classroom. So when I use that term, please know I mean it in the broadest sense, applying to anywhere math teaching and learning occurs. So before I jump in, let me tell you that when I'm not working with math teachers, I'm an avid fiction reader. I even dabble in novel writing in my spare time, not that I have a lot of it. And I tend to think in terms of story arcs and characters. So indulge me as I attempt to tell you the true story of how I fell in love with math. It was not love at first sight. Far from it. even though I was a math kid, or at least what we used to label as math kids, year after year, course after course, I excelled at math. But year after year, course after course, I also kind of hated math. I dreaded it even. In my experience, math class was at best tedious. The classes I took were plenty rigorous and did a fantastic job of building my conceptual understanding, but they failed to make me care even the slightest bit about anything more than my grade. They failed to show me why any of it mattered. Luckily for me, my feelings about math have changed a bit since then. And like any good enemies to lovers story, this one begins with adversaries. And I think it's fair to say that by the time I was in high school, I felt pretty well acquainted with math. I knew math, but the math I knew was pompous, self-important, and boring. And it's more than a bit the way I imagine in the classic love story, Pride and Prejudice, that Elizabeth Bennet feels about Darcy when she first meets him. My history of academic success in math may have suggested that we would be a great fit for one another, but I thought math was a jerk. Really, everything math asked me to do was boring, repetitive, and seemed designed just to point back at math and show me how great and perfect math was. And it would actually take me quite a bit to realize that math was more than something I had to tolerate in polite society. I guess I was fortunate that math and I were forced to hang out due to a few friends we had in common. And speaking mostly of science, chemistry, then physics, and ultimately astronomy were some of my first serious academic relationships. In these classes, I felt for the first time I was really learning about how the world worked, and it excited me. So I started imagining a future career as a scientist. In chemistry, I loved puzzling through chemical equations, but then math showed up unexpectedly to balance those equations. And then in physics, I was entranced to learn about how through gravity, every single speck of matter in the universe pulls on one another. But to make sense of this law, I needed to use an inverse relationship from math. And then in astronomy, math showed up like a third wheel when I learned that a star's future was determined by a function of its mass. So with math, I could predict if a star would become a white dwarf, a red giant, or even a black hole. Math was infuriatingly unavoidable. And what was even more annoying was that it had the gall to be irrefutably useful. And with each new topic, I started to fall a little bit deeper in love with science. Astronomy specifically, but physics and chemistry also had places in my heart, still do. I was enamored with unlocking the secrets of the universe. And the entire time, math kept tagging along, offering to be useful. So reluctantly, math and I came to a bit of a truce, and I begrudgingly accepted its presence, but only when it was going to help me do some really, really cool science. And for the pursuit of the love of my science, I willingly suffered through many more semesters of college math, but it was every bit as disconnected with reality as high school math. And I do mean suffer because in my experience, college math was even more obnoxious and self-important than high school algebra. Truly math for math's sake, and proud of it. And let me acknowledge that there are many people out there who love math in its purest form and for whom there's no greater joy than seeing math make sense of itself. But that's not me, and I can already see in the chat that that's not some of you either. So I pursued my love of science and by extension, science education. And ultimately I earned a math teaching credential as an afterthought to supplement my goal of teaching physics. I thought it might be helpful for securing a job, and I already had all that boring coursework already completed. Math was an annoyingly mutual buddy that I could not shake, but I did my best to ignore it. It actually wasn't until my 10th year in the classroom that I taught a math class. That year, I began teaching both physics and math in a fully project-based program for high school seniors who are mostly just looking to get those last requirements in for graduation. With a few exceptions, these were not students who had been traditionally successful in math. And as a result, they harbored a good bit of fear and angst for the subject. Like me, my students found math fairly deplorable for its arrogance and tedium. In their experience, it was also frustratingly opaque and confusing. And many of them shared stories of the actual tears and pain they experienced in math class. Stories that completely broke my heart to hear about times that math had made them feel small and stupid and helpless. But even though math was right at the center, I could see math itself was not to blame. My students' tormentor was actually math class. And much to my own surprise, I found myself kind of wanting to defend math. And to do that meant finding a way to reintroduce my students to math in a safe and neutral territory. Like my own experience with accepting math through science, I wanted to show how math could actually be useful in the right context. Luckily, I had the perfect means of doing so in my classroom. In this program, we integrated English, social studies, science, and math all together through projects. So I did not make a point to call out to my students when we were doing math or doing science. We just started to look at the world. Let me share some of the projects we did, some of the ways we started looking at the world that got my students to give math another look. We did a study of the types of businesses in the small town the school is located in, which required the use of bar charts and pie graphs to make sense of the various types and sizes of businesses. We then presented our recommendations about gaps we noticed to the local Chamber of Commerce. And I'm sure you would not be surprised to learn that my students' recommendations included trying to attract a skateboard shop and a trendy new clothing store. At least they had some data, though, to support these proposals. And then we examined a problematic stoplight to see if the timing of the yellow light provided adequate time for braking across a wide range of scenarios. And the math showed up again with linear functions and piecewise graphs to help us share those insights with the local sheriff. And one of the biggest insights for the students was just how much distance a car covers while braking. We dove deep on whether or not Warren Buffett's famous March Madness bracket challenge, any basketball fans here, was a safe bet for him. If you're not familiar with this bet, Buffett offered a $1 billion prize in 2014 to anyone who could correctly predict the outcome of all 67 games. Turns out the odds of this are about 1 in 148 quintillion, by the way, which makes it a fairly safe bet for Buffett, but as my students realized, a practically impossible feat for those attempting a perfect bracket. During that year, I watched my students choose to make graphs to support their arguments about land use. I watched my students write equations to design snowshoes. I saw my own nemesis actually helping my students gain confidence and self-efficacy. And I finally saw math in a new light. And that's when it happened. It's when I fell in love. I remember actual flushed cheeks and fluttery heartbeats as I worked on developing new projects for my students, and nervous, clammy hands as I introduced new investigations, watching the faces of my students to see if they would show even a glimmer of excitement. And while I can't honestly say that my students all fell in love with math on the spot, I can report with sincerity that they never once asked, when am I going to use this? And for a group of 17 and 18-year-olds with nothing but getting to the end of school on their mind, I'll take that as a win. But what does this mean for math class? It means that we need to think about how to build relationships, specifically the relationships between students and math. And to do so, we need to consider both how students and math will interact and the emotional experience of our students during those interactions. Building relationships is about fostering connections. It's about the stuff you talk about and experience together. It's those late night conversations that spill over into the morning. It's about the sharing of inside jokes. And now that I'm more than a few decades removed from my own high school experiences, there are fewer and fewer memories that really remain solid. But one particularly potent memory from my blossoming relationship with science, though, was a chemistry teacher who just casually was talking about whether the moon may have been once part of the Earth and how chemistry might help us piece together the history of the moon's origin. And I remember that question following me around for a long time, playing in my head and filling in the moments of boredom at the bus stop or while trying to fall asleep at night. And not only the question, but the promise that science might be the way to answer this question and others like it. And I think this memory, this moment, was a substantial spark in the beginning of my relationship with science. And it was the first of many conversations, if you will, science and I had together. From wondering about the moon to the nature of black holes and the history and the future of the universe, science and I had a lot to talk about. And so I wonder what would have happened if I had found similar common ground with math at an early age? And what would it take to create this opportunity for relationships to bloom in my students? What are the questions that will enthrall their mind that math can answer? And if not answer, at least help us understand and appreciate on a deeper level. Because what I really want is for my students to have a conversation about something important, something relevant, something so fascinating that they can't stop thinking about it, that they can't help but bring up to their friends and families the next day because it's still there working in the back of their brain. And for them to believe they can understand and talk about this thing through math. There are all kinds of conversations we can have that are made richer with math. For example, how dangerous really is texting and driving? Together with math, students can use proportional reasoning to explore how much distance on the road someone misses looking down at their phone for just a quick 3-second text when they're traveling at different speeds. That's middle school math, helping students live more conscientiously, more safely. And who's responsible for the opioid epidemic? Math doesn't offer a final answer on such questions, but it can certainly help to clarify some of the forces at play. Using exponential decay functions, students can model and start to imagine a patient's experience of gaining tolerance for powerful painkillers. They use rational functions to calculate how many pills they need and to explain one of the reasons why patients would need more and more pills over time to maintain a steady level of relief. Should the federal government raise the minimum wage? Again, math isn't an oracle, but it can shine light on complex issues to make debates more informed and thoughtful. To explore the consequences of a higher minimum wage, students, like economists, can write a system of equations to model labor supply and labor demand as wages change. And they can start to anticipate likely consequences when those two things aren't in balance. These questions beg for our attention. And even if our students don't have an extensive background of knowledge in the subject, they likely have some thoughts to share. And just maybe, they will be the sorts of questions that'll take up residence in the back of their brains well beyond the time allocated in class. Beyond conversations and experiences, there's also an emotional component to relationships. It's how they make us feel. And in a healthy, growing relationship, we should feel safe and valued and like we belong. In personal relationships, this is that feeling you have with a close friend or partner when you are free to be yourself, your full self, without fear of rejection. In spite my deep love of science, there were some moments along the way when I was made to feel I did not belong. When it was made clear to me that as a girl, I had no business studying physics, or when small mistakes were used as evidence of my inadequacy rather than as opportunities to learn, moments when hurt and self-doubt outweighed the promises of an exciting future for unlocking mysteries together. And I was lucky enough that in the end, the good experiences for me outweighed the bad. And that I had a few good teachers that helped me see through the lies plaguing my confidence and helped me to find my footing again. I know many of my students had felt deeply rejected by math at one time or another in their past. They shared their stories both at length and in casual offhand comments. I suck at math. Math makes me feel stupid. I'm never going to get this. Before I can make any progress, my students need to feel safe around math again, maybe for the first time, so that they could stop tensing up and looking for exits every time math entered the room. In my teaching, so much of this was in how I treated mistakes. I reconsidered my responses to student errors, ensuring I was communicating in both my words and my actions that mistakes were part of the process and not something to feel fear or shame about. I celebrated the mistakes that helped us shed light on complexity in the real world. I modeled my own process of identifying and working through the mistakes in my work. Opportunities to identify and correct their errors and gain confidence that they were fully capable of doing so. Next, I need to make them feel valued. This meant giving them time and space to share their thought process without fear of judgment from others. It meant validating multiple perspectives and approaches to problem solving. It meant making time for them to share their thoughts on the real world contexts, such as texting while driving, even if it veered a bit away from the lesson itself. And finally, on the emotional front, my students needed to feel like they belonged with math, that their success was expected because they were capable. I have a physics teaching friend who's actually originally from Minnesota, who often reminds me that nothing breeds success like success. For my classroom, this meant any complex problem started with an entry point that was accessible to all of my students. So before we launched into a huge economic study of businesses in our community, we spent some time just talking about the businesses my students frequented or knew about. We established together that they already knew some things from their experiences and could draw some early conclusions. And from there, thinking about what further data we would want to collect and how we might want to analyze it to test their ideas felt more natural and more doable. Helping them start to act like analysts, economists, or scientists or engineers in small ways, and then using those early successes to affirm their place in those worlds, help them to start rewriting their own stories and unlock new possibilities for themselves. But strong relationships are two-way streets. So while it was important that I or my students felt safe, valued, and affirmed in the relationship to math, we also need to accept and honor math's whole self. We need to see and appreciate the totality of math. We need to understand both math's inner workings and how math interacts with the world. We needed to see math for all that it is. For me, this meant I had to do quite a bit of reckoning of my past with both math and math class. I did peel back those early notions about math as a self-centered jerk and see what lay beneath. And to be honest with myself and with you, I have to admit, I don't think I had given math a fair shake. By early middle school, I had written math off as a bore and began treating it like just an irritating chore I had to complete. Because in my early math learning experiences, I only ever looked at math and not at what math was doing for the world, not at what math could do for and with me. And I know that at least part of this was not math's fault. At least some of the fault lay in the incompleteness of my own math learning experiences. My mathematical learning experiences included both developing procedural fluency and conceptual understanding, but they stopped there. It was akin to treating math like that arrogant jerk who showed up really well dressed for the party and then looked down their noses at everyone. Instead, we have to give our students a chance to really use the math they are learning to understand problems, articulate their positions, and craft their own solutions. And this means going beyond the overly sanitized and simplified application problems that we've all seen, the ones that Lindsay mentioned in the intro, the calculating apples and marbles and dimensions for a sandbox. They're useful for skill development and for practice, but they're not enough to make us want to embrace math into our lives. I can almost picture math standing there in the corner at a party, juggling apples and expecting me to be impressed. Big what? No. Instead, we need to honor the full nature of mathematics and honor the full range of capabilities in our students who are all capable and deserving of a meaningful relationship with math. So one way to think about math's completeness is to imagine that math itself is a telescope. Telescopes themselves are scientific marvels. The work Galileo did to improve the telescope is some of the most significant. So much so, he is often miscredited with its invention. But I would suspect it's not nearly as interesting as what he discovered by looking through the telescope. When Galileo pointed his telescope at the moon, he discovered that the supposedly perfect heavenly sphere was pockmarked with mountains, valleys, and craters, even more than Earth was. And this alone was akin to heresy in his time. And then he turned his gaze on Jupiter and discovered there were several other smaller objects orbiting the planet. These are now known as the Galilean moons in his honor. His discoveries threw a pretty big wrench in the idea that the whole universe revolved around us here on Earth. In short, Galileo upended our entire understanding of the universe at the time by using a telescope to look at the world. So, as beautiful and fascinating as his telescope was, if you do nothing but examine the telescope itself, if you spend all your time marveling at the perfectly carved and aligned lenses, you're kind of missing the point. And like the telescope, math too can be extremely beautiful and fascinating on its own. But beauty alone is not enough to build a real relationship. If we never use math to do anything real, we've really missed out on what it has to offer. Math is far more than theorems and processes and algorithms it contains. Math lets us see the world more clearly, argue our stance more convincingly, and solve our problems more confidently. And in a healthy relationship with math, we feel like we are more capable of taking on the world. So you might be wondering, how do we begin to help our students build healthy relationships with math? Well, I won't claim to know your students. You're the expert in that. I can make my best guess on the sort of relationships some of them have with math right now. High school math, specifically algebra, often plays the part of a gatekeeper to further education. To many, math is the enemy that is keeping them from their goals. Students may dislike math so much that they've lost all interest in getting to know math on any level. And this means that if we try to invite students to hang out with math, they're not even willing to play nice and sit down to dinner. It does not matter that we know they might be a great fit for another. Our students cannot be bothered, so we might have to be sneaky matchmakers and ease them in to coming together. All students want to do cool stuff. They just likely have no idea that math can be part of it. So I think a great place to start can be with conversations about things that spark student curiosity, and let them experience for themselves how math can help them see the world more clearly or even live in it more fully. Maybe they want to talk about how sports teams should spend their money. Let's crunch some numbers and see if we can whip up a linear regression to see if teams with bigger payrolls win more games. Maybe they're trying to figure out which used car will be most affordable in the long run. Let's write some inequalities to see how much we'd have to drive a hybrid for the savings in gas to offset the initial price. Maybe they're still paying off their seats from Taylor Swift's Eras tour, one event about the high cost of ticket prices. Let's use percentages to calculate exactly how much that ticket price makes, how much of that ticket price actually makes its way to the artists we support, and figure out if we think ticket scalping should be regulated. Maybe they want to understand the real risk of a new virus working its way through our communities. We can rely on math to help us model exponential growth for ourselves and cut through the noise of the pundits. Or maybe they just want to joke about who's going to eat the most Halloween candy at the end of next month. And math can graph the marginal enjoyment to help us see that sometimes more candy won't mean more satisfaction. And as we have these conversations, we're still tending to the emotional experiences as well. We conduct these discussions so that they help our students grow into their most confident and capable selves, so that through them, they come to understand more fully all that math can do. In the end, I hope that your students fall in love with math. Or if math is still firmly in your friend zone, you give it another look as well. Because love is complicated and love stories don't happen in a straight line. But I think if we keep finding ways to invite math along and show off, not for what it can do for itself, but for us, our students, our society, maybe our students will let math into their hearts, because we all deserve to feel that math is on our side, and that together with math, we can better see the world. We might even see stars. Excuse me. So what I want to do now is give you a chance to think about this, to think about how you might make your class a place where students build strong and positive relationships with math. In a moment, we're going to do something unusual for a keynote. I'm going to quit offering my thoughts and invite you to offer yours. And together we're going to write, journal, if you will, which may leave you wondering whether I completely missed the assignment here when I agreed to give this keynote. But hang with me a moment, because I have a method to support this madness. First, I believe the true depth of knowledge and education lives in the classrooms with the educators who know their content, their students, and their context deeply. You are the people who actually have the expertise in how to improve your math classroom and the skills to make sound judgments about how to proceed in doing that. Second, I know that in every workshop, conference, or course that had an impact on my classroom, somewhere in the experience I had a chance to poke at ideas and make sense of the consequences. The real learning happens when we start talking and thinking through the implications for our own students and contexts. I've carried the stance over into my current position as Director of Professional Learning at Citizen Math, where I believe my work is far more about asking the right questions than having the right answers. So I want to hand over to you my trust that you will consider thoughtfully what helping your students build relationships with math will look like for you. There is nothing more I would like to do at this moment than just have a conversation with each of you about your classroom. But that doesn't work with this many people. So instead, you're going to have a conversation with yourself. But don't worry, I brought us some questions. And while we consider these questions, I ask that you commit fully to this conversation by putting a pen to paper, or if you need to, keyboard to screen. When we write our way through a question, rather than just simply like thinking about it, we are often able to uncover some thoughts that are lying a bit more deeply beneath the surface. So for each question, I will give you a few minutes to write. I'm going to shut up and time a few minutes for each question. And I ask that you don't think and then write. Just write. Put your pen to paper and just start writing before the ideas come. Just write the same word over and over again. Write the question over and over again if you have to start. So it's time to take out a paper, pencil, get comfortable, stretch your wrists. It's a little strange not being able to see everyone. I actually don't know if you're taking out your pencil. So, but this is my trust that you are playing along here, that your paper is out and you're ready to really think about your classroom. So I have 4 big questions to ask, but we're going to take them one at a time and you'll have several minutes to write for each. These answers are just for you. This is ultimately a conversation with yourself, but I do hope you surface some insights that you may want to share throughout your conversations with others during today's workshop and beyond. So are you with me? You rule following Minnesotans, as I see in the chat. Are you with me? Well, let's get started. All right. The first thing I want to do is I want to tease out the vision for the math class of your dreams. The one where you can watch your students develop meaningful relationships with math. For me, when I picture this, a truly ideal math learning experience, my students are having a conversation about the real world, and they're using math to analyze and communicate and problem solve. I see my students talking and listening, really listening, but not to me, to one another. They're either in small groups or maybe we're together in a whole group and we're looking at the problem together. It's a real problem, something they care about and something that really matters. Their bodies are leaning forward, their brows are furrowed in concentration. There's writing and calculating and thinking, but none of it feels labored or extraneous. It feels natural, connected to the problem we are poking. There's moments of levity and other moments where the silence falls while everyone takes a collective beat to gather their thoughts. Voices are rising and falling. They're impassioned without ever veering towards disrespect. And when students talk, they prod and question the idea, but they don't criticize one another. I think time runs out when the conversation has just had a chance to wrap up, but maybe before the topic's been completely exhausted. The thinking and the learning keep going after the formal learning times come to an end, and the students carry the questions and realizations into their other interactions that day, maybe beyond, when they talk to friends, when they talk to family. And the students feel tired and proud and maybe a bit empowered by their own ideas. And I feel like I've avoided the spotlight. Maybe I've just kind of kept to the edges, offer a little pushback when something's gone astray. Or maybe I've engaged in some part as an equal and not as the expert. But that's my vision. And what I want you to do now is connect with your vision. So the first question I want you to write about is this. What does happily ever after, what does a happily ever after relationship with math for your students look like? When you try to capture, what are your students doing and saying? What are they feeling? What are you feeling? What does happily ever after relationship with math for your students look like? And I'm going to shut up and time. Start with 3-4 minutes. Okay, that's time. So finish your thought. Hopefully now you have a clear picture of your vision or the start of one for a learning experience where students fall in love with math. But I suspect that is not the reality that most of us are working in today. There's forces at play keeping our students and math apart from one another. And similarly, there are forces at play that keep our math classes from fostering the dreamy math relationship we want our students to have. Forces that hold us and our math classes in place. They've always been, and they keep them from becoming what we dream they could be. These forces could take the shape of preconceived notions about math class, They include beliefs held by pop culture and society and family and friends. They're both the explicit and implicit assumptions formed from our own relationships with math. They might be expectations pushed on us by peers or policy, education courses, workshops, conferences. And for me, I have this feeling that as a teacher, I need to know everything about a lesson, how a lesson will play out in advance. And that ties me to closed-ended activities where I can predict the outcome. And I feel like I have to know all the answers all the time, which limits the real-world topics I'm willing to take on with my students. And I carry a suspicion that my students come into my classroom expecting it to be hard or boring or painful, which I inadvertently reaffirm with my words and actions. But these forces and pressures weighing on your teaching will be different from those I described for me. And I think there will be some on the surface that you can identify really quickly, but I'm asking you in advance to just keep writing, keep going. What has been shaping your teaching for so long that you can't even see it anymore? So our second question is, what are the unseen forces pushing and pulling on your math teaching? What creates resistance for you when you think about your vision? So what are those unseen forces pushing and pulling on your math teaching? I'll give you another 3 minutes. Okay, that's time again. So go ahead and finish your thought. So what do? On one hand, we hold this beautiful vision for our students learning to love math. And on the other, we hold the weight of all that it is right now, along with the added inertia of all the stereotypes, beliefs, and cultural expectations that shape math learning today. And here's the hard part, because we have to make choices. Change always comes with a cost, and we have to let go of some things to make our vision bloom. And I can't tell you what choice to make. You hold the expertise as an educator, and specifically an educator in your context. And I could not presume to know what you know about your students. But that also means you have to be the one to make the hard choices. And when you're thinking about pursuing your vision, what holds you back? That's going to be our third question. What's scary or ugly or just uncomfortable to look at too closely? If you shared your vision, what are you afraid might go wrong? For me, I'm held back by the sense that if I let my classroom stray too far from what is expected, I won't be taken seriously as a teacher by my students, colleagues, parents. But what are you afraid of? And why are you afraid? And I don't mean this to minimize your fears or concerns, but I'm asking you to shine a bit of light on them for yourself so you can decide which ones is a valid concern and which one was just a boogeyman in the dark. So once again, when you think about pursuing your vision, what holds you back? I'll give you 3 minutes. Okay, that's time. So finish your thought as we move to our last question. Maybe at this moment, you feel miles away from your vision, or maybe it feels close, like a few tweaks, you could be there. Either way, you can start with one step in that direction. So take a moment and choose for yourself one small step. What's one tiny action you can take tomorrow? Well, Monday. And if you're not sure what this step is yet, let's use the rest of this conference together today to find one. The step that lets you know that you are irrefutably on the path towards your vision for making math real for your students. Okay, so our last question, what is one tiny action you can take tomorrow? I'll give you a few minutes. All right, that's time. Hopefully you got started on at least one little idea, one little step. But if not, there's still time today. And I want you to remember that you hold the knowledge and judgment to uncover and navigate this path forward. I think one of the best things we can give teachers is time to think deeply about their practice. So I hope today you've had some time to surface and connect with your own insights and wisdom. Thank you again for welcoming me into the Math Institute today. And thank you to my Citizen Math team who helps continue to support and inspire this work. And I hope that by sharing my math love story and my vision for a better math class this morning, we're able to shine a little bit of light on your own visions. I'm honored to be among this group of thoughtful and dedicated educators who are working towards better learning experiences for students who really need and deserve something a bit different. than what our traditional systems can offer. And though there's no magical fairy godmother in the math love stories you're going to help your students write, I hope I provided some ideas for you to consider in your own teaching, and the reminder that you are experts in this work. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Okay, I don't even have to say. I was going to say put some love in the chat, but the love's already coming. So thank you, thank you. Those were very powerful questions. Yeah, I'm still thinking through my answers to those. So we are going to take a short break, and then we are going to come back and actually get to be students. We're going to explore a real question, right? We're going to see what this is like in action. So definitely go refill your coffee, but come on back, and we'll welcome Heather to lead us in an activity. Thank you.